Good afternoon, everybody. It's Thursday, March 27th, 2025. It's 5:03 p.m. and this is the monthly Board of Directors meeting of the Bristol County Water Authority. The next item on the agenda following call to order is public input. I don't see any members of the public here tonight, so we'll move on. We have minutes from previous meetings to approve. First one is the Personnel Committee from February 27th, 2025. They're in the packages. Do I have a motion to approve those?
Motion to approve.
I have a second on that.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes from the Personnel Committee of February 27th, 2025, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it.
Lauren, I'll abstain for this and the next one since I wasn't here.
Okay.
Okay, the next set of minutes are for the board meeting from February 27th, 2025.
Move to approve, but with a clarification. Lauren, on page 2.
Let me get a second.
Second.
Okay.
On page 2, at the very last item under Executive Director of Support, it reads, we are currently advertising for a water utility operator and we will be doing testing on March 5. Testing of potential candidates or?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, yeah. So I was like, I'll.
Okay, then it's okay the way it is.
Oh, it's okay the way it is?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
That's the way I read that. I wasn't sure.
Any other comments, questions, critiques, changes? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, the minutes are approved. The next set of minutes are for the Properties Committee of March 13th, 2025.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll ask for a vote. All those in favor of approving the minutes from the Properties Committee of March 13th, 2025, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Okay, now we'll move on to the Executive Director's Report. Mr. Kutu.
Yes, good evening, everybody. Let's go through the report here. So for the pipe connection, we continue to push beta to move the plans forward to the 90% completion stage. They usually got some comments from Rhode Island Energy with respect to gas line infrastructure as well, so they're folding that into the plans. And continue to work on easement documents and appraisals for where the pipeline crosses over private property. And this past month, I did receive a request from East Province. Apparently, they're trying to get some federal funding. I'm not sure how lucky they'll be given the current situation. But anyways, they asked for some letters of support, so I took that as, well, looks like they're looking to get some funding for the project, which is a plus. So I provided the letters that I provided to them.
We like that.
Plan for the demo of the plant. As you all know, we had a meeting at the Properties Committee on March 13th with further discussion from the community groups, and we'll have some further discussion on that topic this evening. The upper dam, we learned that the contractor will be coming back to the site sometime late April, early May. We met with the engineer there yesterday, developing a punch list of items to be completed. It's basically some minor grading, cleanup, things like that. And there'll be quite a bit of planting work to be done, particularly in the upper dam. It's pretty bare up there right now. So that work will take this sometime this spring. And this is going to be an ongoing project. There is, according to some permit approvals, there's post-monitoring work to be done, and probably do some follow-up plantings for next fall, probably the following spring, to make sure that site gets restabilized.
What kind of planting are they doing?
Plantings that will work within a, that type of environment. saltwater type plants. And there's also kind of uplands, because they cleared not only where the dam was by the water, but, you know, they removed most of the earthen berm to the west. And so that's all just like wooded right now, so, but, I mean, you could drive in there currently, so, you know, the idea is to plant trees, shrubs, and we're gonna put like some type of a gate across there, so kind of secure the area. And we did receive, despite the pause on federal funding, we did get reimbursement money, $300,000, so that was good to see. The lead service line program will pick up this spring. About 20 remains to get replaced. I already mentioned the BCWA Properties Committee. For public information, I prepared the attached customer letter that goes out into the bills, informs the customers of the rate decrease for this coming year. Also take the opportunity to update customers on some of the more significant projects that we're working on.
Did you consider highlighting that it's one of the lowest rate increases in many years? Or,
I did not.
I don't know if that opens up a can of worms or how the public might take that.
The letter I gave you is a letter that's done.
Oh, sorry, it's already been sent.
Yeah.
All right.
It's already been.
For our information.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Graphs for the water purchases are included, slight downtick from the prior 5-year average. We did hold our interviews for the water utility operator positions, and we hope to fill that vacancy in the coming weeks. And I have a table of the capital improvement projects and their remaining budgets, all of those projects are in good shape. And that concludes my report.
Any questions of the director? Mike?
So we're getting ready for the construction season, and that's taking the shape of getting out operating valves, and the unique thing about this year's project is it's also going to cut off the services to the plant. So continuing to move out of the large plant building and the smaller building, unfortunately it's into containers. But we're continuing that effort to be totally out of there, so when we cut these services off, we can cut all the building services off to the plant until a path forward is crafted. To support a lot of these materials, we did procure an additional canopy structure, and then we actually put it together ourselves and outfitted it with some electrical based off the existing electrical we have there, and that will support our needs now, and then these are installed in such a manner that they can be permanent fixtures if we ever redevelop the site back there. Otherwise, out in the system, thankfully, break frequency has gone down significantly, and then in the coming weeks, we'll start a lot of our planned work. You'll see us out there replacing services, installing valves like we did today out on Wooding, and things like that. So we'll be anxious to get going with our capital improvement contractor on Monday, and start off with hopefully a busy construction season.
It was mentioned in one of the reports that as we do the work on Gooding and address the issues we had with the pipe there that we had problems with, that we'll be able to increase the pressure in other areas of the system.
Yep.
Can you define what that geographic area is?
So it's going to be so right now the high service is delineated at the intersection of Broad Common and Gooding, and it extends east out to Metcon. These improvements will allow us to extend it west to the intersection of Gooding and Naomi, and then project south down Naomi and catch those neighborhoods. Our pipe actually dead ends. It doesn't go all the way through to Chestnut, I believe it is.
Yes.
So it'll just capture those neighborhoods.
Oh, okay.
But yes, once we do this, we're looking at the notices today that we send out to folks. We'll send them a notice, say, actually it'll be the second time they get the notice because we sent it to them already before we discovered the pipe failure. But we'll send it to them and they'll be expecting to see that higher pressure once the improvements are complete.
Now, without getting involved in any of the controversy of the project, when projects like the hotel proposed for Gooding Avenue come along, how closely is that coordinated with ourselves to make sure that we have the water to provide a new facility which would have pretty good demand, I guess?
So we require total project documentations for developments like that for both domestic and fire demand. So they have actually already started looking at that. They did some flow testing out in the system. And then their engineer will provide the requisite documentation that will be stamped by a professional engineer to say whether there is requisite flow, flow needs to be augmented, or what have you. So there's a pretty thorough process. On the planning level, we don't really, we take part in technical review committee meetings, but we don't really get involved in the planning process. We limit our approvals to the application process. So we will approve or deny domestic or fire service applications.
Right, and as we've discussed around the table, and I was making remarks prior to the meeting about the graphs and charts and data that's always provided, and showing that our overall consumption in Bristol County has continued to drop a little bit. So if you look at it from a historical viewpoint, it would seem that there's a lot of opportunity here for water-using businesses or even expansion of residential. Unfortunately, there aren't a lot of water-using industries around anymore. But I was just curious, because I've seen in the past where you pick the wrong place to put a hotel or whatever, because it would then put a burden on us, but I can't imagine it would be a burden to us.
In that location, probably not. We will look at it as far as what documentation comes across. Unfortunately, it's kind of a function of what size main is in front of that property. We have another project that we're reviewing right now where the main is it doesn't have the same capacity. So we're actually studying that with a consultant to make sure the demand they propose does not negatively impact the rest of the customers that are on that main, because it's not a very large main.
Right.
So luckily that doesn't happen that often. Luckily this system has big mains, and like you're saying, we've had reduced consumption, so there is capacity. So, but there's just not a lot of big customers coming into town.
Thank you.
That is one of the items though that the engineering group, they often do a lot of reviews for any new development, and we're actively for reviewing the plans for the new Mount Hope High School.
Yeah.
There are a lot of services presently, and also with the redevelopment of the large mill down in Bristol, required a full kind of rebuild of the water system infrastructure in front of the mill building at the end of the road there. So there's other projects that we actively work on.
Good. Any other questions, comments for Mike? Colin?
All right, first thing I have is about the 2025 capital improvement project, just kind of a summary of the bidding process. So the bids were posted on February 26th. The documents were available on the website. There was a non-mandatory pre-bid meeting on March 6th here at 9 a.m. JML, Excavation, Ducon, and CV Utility were attended. The question deadline was March 13th. No questions were received, so no addendums were issued. And at the time, 5 firms downloaded the plans from our website. And then we had the bid opening on March 19th at 9 a.m. here. We got 1 bid from Boyle & Fogarty. And we can get into, I guess, another, we'll talk about that more later on. But I have a bid coming up later tonight about the acceptance of the bid. And as far as the 2024 capital improvement project, the Ducon work, they are scheduled, they're working on the getting the permits for the remaining 20 service renewals. They're expected to come back on March 31st, which is Monday, and the permanent asphalt restoration to occur in July and August of this year.
Any questions of Howard? Galen, finances.
Yeah. We made it to the end of the year. We're up to February. So these are the pre-audit statements. I didn't do all my audit work on these. I created these. Some I did, but there's a little bit more work that I put into the final numbers that we give to the auditors. Sorry. So if we look at February versus February on page 4, revenue's up almost 15%. That's due to consumption. When we get to that consumption page, you'll see the consumption is up considerably for this February versus last February. Expenses are down almost 17%. That's largely the water purchase for February, down 54,000. There's some decrease in billing and customer service expense as a result of I make an adjustment to the allowance for North Farm. At the end of the year, I actually did make that adjustment for these statements too. Usually February I haven't made that adjustment yet. I did make the adjustment. So it actually went down because they made that $150,000 payment this year. So usually every year we allow for whatever the increase in the receivable balance is. Because they made that $150,000 payment this year, the increase in the allowance wasn't quite as much, so that actually brought that billing and customer service expense down. It's been to like $116,000. I think the adjustment was like maybe less than 20 grand, and it's usually for closer to 150. So that's that. When we get the cumulative through February, income is up 6.323% for the year, which is basically the rate increase, because there's a slight decrease in consumption, so it's basically the rate increase. Year-to-date expenses were up slightly, just under 1%. We've gone over this one before. Administrative expense, these are the 3 biggest ones. Administrative expense is lower by $118,000, largely due to the pension contribution amount for fiscal 25 versus fiscal 24. Operations and maintenance is higher by about $67,000. We had some additional paving expenses in the prior fiscal year. And billing and customer service expense is lower, like I just said, because of the adjustment for the allowance of doubtful accounts for North Farm was significantly lower than it was in the prior fiscal year. When we get to actual to budget on page 6, we're over budget for revenue, just over 10%, which is good. The decrease in consumption was a little bit, compared to the prior year, but it's a little bit higher than what we had budgeted. Consumption was a little bit higher than what we budgeted. Expenses are under budget, 8.82%. That's also good. The 3 largest areas under budget there were the salary and wages and admin, about $95,000. Water purchases down $370,000. Professional fees down $264,000. The salaries and wages and admin were under budget due to we had budgeted a position and we subsequently just didn't fill the position. And then there's a couple openings in there. This year we had some people come and go and some dead time. Sue Rabideau and replaced by Colin. We had a month or so, 2 months there, so that's part of the under budget as well. For purchase water, obviously the consumption was lower overall than what we budgeted. And the professional fees are just down. We just didn't have as much consulting and legal fees this year than we budgeted. Legal fees I think ticked up lately, but we just had less than we budgeted. So we get to pages 7 8 and 9, we have the dollars billed and consumption and gallons delivered. You can see on page 7, if you look down the bottom piece, the gallons delivered, 70 million this fiscal February versus just under 60 million last February. That's why February versus February, the revenue was up so much. And if we go to page 10, the trustee fund report, the debt service ratio is 7.05, which I think is the exact same amount as it was in January. We do have the pension report, summary report on page 11. Decrease for the month, almost 40,000, but for the year, it's still up almost 225,000, largely unrealized gains through February. Remember, the pension year goes through June, so we still have a few months left in that. And page 12 is just for presentation purposes only. It's the OPEB trust balance, so it's just under $1.2 million in the OPEB account. So that's really it. Again, I'm working on tightening up the February numbers for the audit. I'm gonna do some extra adjustments and depreciation and stuff, but that's going well.
Dave, just one question, and I
Yeah.
just can't remember this. So the 30+ million that's sitting in the revenue fund, what is that invested in?
I have to look at the thing, but it's just normal, safe investments making a modest interest. They're not like in bond, not in like stocks or anything. I think it's in like money markets or something like that. I haven't looked at the exact,
Okay.
but whatever it is it's safe to not lose value.
Okay.
Speaking of investments, in Washington Trust, we provide 2 pages here on how those funds are doing and such. And I'm curious, and it's probably too early at this point in here, but because of the fluctuations in the market over the last couple of months, and the rush one way or the other, I'm wondering if they have started to change their investment directions at all.
They have to make a presentation.
And I'm not expecting you to know the answers.
Yeah, no.
That's what- I was just wondering when I looked at it, because typically they've done very well, I think. And so I'm just curious how they do when it's a kind of unpredictable market.
Well, so far through February, it's doing okay. You can see February went down, but
Yeah.
actually there is some stocks and bonds there, but it's relatively, I think we have an investment policy and they stay within some parameters. But you're right, they probably are changing some individual things
And
in
I
there.
think, not that many years ago, I think the Finance Committee had given some, expressed some preferences on what types of investments should be made, or generally speaking. I have a not clear recollection of that, but I remember there was a considerable discussion of what did they invest in and so forth. And I thought something came out of that. Anyway, on an annual basis, they provide detailed information behind all of these numbers. Do they also provide?
Yes, yeah. I get one that has the monthly.
Yeah,
So every month, you're right, at the end of the year, they do give one that has the entire year,
yeah,
which is, and for the OPEB one, it's quarterly.
yeah.
You get quarterly detail, and usually there's not much activity, you know what I mean? They don't do a
Right.
lot of buying and selling. It's usually just the income that's spun off of them.
Sure.
It's not a ton.
All right, thank you.
Ken, do you mind putting on the financial analyst summary, just like the status of the audit, just since it's a new auditor, like, when they come out for planning, like what the current status is?
Oh, okay. What, next month?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
going forward, it's like, oh, they started planning, we're in the fieldwork days, they were in wrap-up. Just to know where they are.
Yeah.
New firm.
Yeah. I mean, they're working on whatever, I wouldn't say necessarily they're planning because they haven't given them much yet. They're doing a little bit of planning. They sent a letter over for me to sign to the predecessor auditor. So they're working on that kind of planning, getting ready for it.
Yep.
Okay. Any other discussion about reports from staff? Okay, we'll move on. Next item on the agenda is the annual agricultural land lease for hay fields. Steve?
Yeah, as we do that every year, about the RFP for haying of the, some of our larger pieces of property for haying. And we received one proposal from Eric's Farm for $1,620 per year. Mr. Fergus does a great job. I recommend that we award the agricultural land lease.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion, any questions? How does this compare with last year?
It's a little less. He did ask about going forward, whether the authority would consider making this a 3-year term.
I think that's a good idea next year.
I did mention that a couple years ago, but,
See, you were ahead of the time.
but that's when we had 2 people bidding on it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Okay, the next item on the agenda is financial advisor services.
So every 3 years, we go out for request for proposals for financial advisor services. This is mainly for when and if we go out for bond. That's what these folks work on. We received 2 proposals, Hilltop Securities and Masterson Advisors. We've successfully worked with Hilltop Securities in the past. They have competitive pricing. They have the experience in Rhode Island working with the infrastructure bank. We are recommending that we continue to work with Hilltop Securities.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any questions to the director on this? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. The ayes have it. The next item on the agenda is the contract award for 2025 Water Main Improvement Program.
Yeah, just following up, Colin mentioned in his report, we did go out to bid. We only did receive one bid, unfortunately, but fortunately it is from a good contractor. We did have 3 companies come to the pre-bid. Boyle Ford did not come to the pre-bid. So we were a little surprised that we didn't get more, but nonetheless, we reviewed the numbers provided by Boyle and Fogarty. They're within the range that we had estimated. And so we are recommending that a contract award be made to Boyle and Fogarty for that total bid price of $1,033,152. And with the overall project budget be approved for $1.5 million, which is the approved amount in the capital budget.
Move to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Just one question for Steve.
Yes.
Do we do any follow-up with these folks that were with the pre-bid conference? I'm just, it'd be interesting to know why they didn't bid.
I think for, at least I know for one, the job just wasn't big enough for them. For the others, I'm not sure. I don't know if you guys talked to.
I spoke to one, and it was in line with what Steve said. There wasn't enough production work. Some of the abandonment of the plant is unique and time consuming, and they were focused more on getting in a lot of feet per day of pipe, because that's what they get paid for. So they didn't align with how their crews operate.
Is there a lot of work out in the southeastern Massachusetts, Rhode
A
Island?
lot of cleaning and lining work out right now. So we're fortunate that we're not doing cleaning and lining because we may have not gotten any responses, especially for a smaller job. There are a lot of big cleaning and lining projects, 25,000+ feet.
And we've had good experience with Boyle and Fogarty in the past, so at least we got a good contractor, this and we know about it, so.
Yes, they're very competent, well respected in the city.
Any other comments, questions? All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the next item is task order for engineering inspection services for 2025 construction projects.
Yes, as we do annually, we request a task order from PAR, as they are engineering service contractor for this time period. And their rates are in accordance with their current contract. They've estimated 35 weeks of construction time. I mean, they take into account, someone being there every day, 5 days a week. But we're billed on the actual time that the inspector is there. So we're recommending that the attached task order be approved, the amount not to exceed $180,649.60.
Motion to approve.
And, thank you. And as it says in here, they only get billed on the hours worked, so it could be less than that. And the question, do you know if the hourly rates have gone up substantively from last year? You notice that?
They will.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's almost the same amount as last year, actually.
Just a question, I'm about to get in trouble for this, but how does that rate compare to the police protection of the jobs?
What the total amount on a contract?
Just a rough idea.
I don't know, what do we usually budget for police details? About 10% of the job?
Yeah, roughly. Are you talking hourly rate or?
I don't know, just.
So, I mean, for the just jobs like 1.5, it's probably, we'll probably be paying almost between 100, 120, 50,000 police details. But particularly where, we're gonna be on Gooding Avenue and Child Street. So, very busy places to work.
Just curious.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Okay. Good. Moving on. The next item is the task order to Power Corporation for engineering services related to the removal of the abandoned Shad Factory pipeline. Steve?
Yeah, so as I had mentioned to the board in past meetings, we own the abandoned pipeline that used to bring water from the Shad Factory reservoir down to the Kickaneer Reservoir. And a portion of that runs right along the Palmer River in the salt marsh. 3,000 feet of that is above ground, and then there's sections that kind of dive under the water and come back up again. But there's 1,000 feet in Swansea, Mass, and 2,000 feet in Warren, and the property is owned by Swansea Country Club. And we recently approved an access agreement with the country club. Pipeline's in poor condition, subject to breaking apart. But Save the Bay, who has helped the authority quite a bit with respect to obtaining grants, and they were a champion for the dam removal project. They, had an interest in getting the pipeline removed, and they secured some grant funding for themselves. And they have a separate contract working with PAR for the engineering and permitting on the Rhode Island side for $88,000. This task order will take care of the permitting pieces for the Massachusetts and whatever federal permits are required. And so that task order amount comes at $36,500, which I'm requesting approval for.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any comments or questions?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, Rhode Island Energy is planning to replace the high tension line.
Yeah.
Right in that same area.
Right,
Is there any possibility, they're gonna have to, what
maybe,
they usually do is they put in a log road.
yes,
Any way we could?
there may be, yes. Yep, we're aware of that.
You're looking on it?
Yep.
Into, oh, good,
Yeah.
good.
Good. Mike, what's interesting here is that Save the Bay, which is not a water utility, nor do they own utilities, has gotten a grant to do the engineering permitting requirements for the Rhode Island segment of our pipeline. And we're gonna pay for the permitting in Massachusetts and from the feds. So I just find it a curious thing that a water agency is having a nonprofit do work that benefits the utility. And I wonder about if there are any legal issues associated with this, Joe, on, with Save the Bay hiring an engineering company to do an evaluation and permitting on this, on our facilities, being in our right-of-way or whatever. I'm just wondering if there's any issue here that we should concern ourselves with. It seems, it is an oddity. You don't usually get nonprofit organizations coming to the rescue of a government agency to do work for them. I'm not saying they shouldn't do it. We're going to get the benefit from that, but I just wonder if there's something that we're not thinking about. Well,
In what sense? Like,
I don't know, if somebody out there and they get hurt, who do they go after? They were working on our pipe, the pipe breaks, somebody gets hurt. Do we have to grant them permission to be in our right-of-way or on our property, if it's our property, working on a pipe so that we can limit liability or anything like that? I don't know. I'm just throwing it out. It's an odd situation to me, that you're having someone else, you know, being sort of like somebody says to me, hey, I can come over and evaluate your sewers and your water lines one, and I'll fix them too. It just...
someone comes to, like, your house?
Yeah, no, it's not a good comparison, but I'm just saying that we have a nonprofit agency who, because they have similar interests, and they would like to clean up the river
Yeah.
and remove any problems along the river, whether it's pollution or if it's just a aesthetic issue. And we probably have both there. And so they managed to get a grant to go and do the engineering permitting. And we're certainly going to cooperate and work with them. But it's our facilities. I don't know. If you don't think there's any issue here.
I just don't know what I don't know, like, in what sense, like, what is it, what's the specific worry, I guess is?
My issue always would be liability if something goes wrong.
Okay, so if something goes wrong, I don't know what that would be, but something goes wrong. Do you mean if something goes wrong to?
And somebody is hurt.
Okay, so somebody gets hurt. If it's an employee who gets hurt, it's a workers' compensation issue. If it's another person who gets hurt, would they sue? They probably sue, you're typically gonna sue everybody involved.
Oh, yeah.
So if they sue everybody involved, then your insurance is gonna come in.
Right.
So, you know, I don't think I would let that stop anything, because it's fairly, you know, it's kind of hypothetical, but if it does happen, they'd probably name everybody, But that's ultimately why you have insurance.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
okay. I won't worry about it.
I mean, we don't have, these same people have been going on to the dam properties. They've been going, we've had people go into the, build, we're not having them
I
sign waivers.
agree, and if I
Everything.
had understood that better, probably at the time, I probably would have raised the same question.
I think that's why you have insurance, right? Because you never know, they could name you even if you weren't liable, but that's why you would have insurance.
And, okay,
I mean, it's something that Save the Bay does fairly often. I mean, they get a chunk of federal funds and they look for projects and they help other, either not, I mean, we're the board agency, but they assist other, communities.
Because they can tap into money that you probably would not be available to us.
yeah, and I agree, it's nice that they're gonna do that. I just wonder if there's an issue somewhere along the lines, but, okay.
One more question for Steve. So we say here we'd be responsible for Massachusetts and federal. Have we done any exploration if there would be any other not-for-profit in Massachusetts that potentially could do the same thing that Save the Bay is doing around?
Yeah, can I say the Bay if they know anybody?
Do you think Wendy would know from Save the Bay? She might know.
Yeah.
The only organization I can think of is the Trustees of the Reservations, which is kind of a land use preservation organization which covers all of Massachusetts. I'm not specifically aware of anything down in southeast. Boston has Boston Harbor Now, which would do it, but they're not going to cover down here. So.
Yeah. I mean, it might be worth looking into. I mean, again, this is kind of, I would say shrub money compared to like what, they're putting in for this. But it's really just for the soft costs at this point. If this does get approved and we will get a budget estimate, I think it's going to be quite costly to actually remove it. And then I think at that point we kind of look for grant sources everywhere anyway.
The item that sounds promising is what John brought up about the utility doing work out there about the same time, so.
Well, I don't know if it's about the same time. I know they're planning to put new poles in there. They're gonna take all the old wooden ones out and put steel.
Okay, we have a motion that's been made and seconded. All those in favor to approve the task order for power operation, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Okay, the next item on the agenda is a board vote on executive director annual goals. Steve included in the package. Let's see if something remember. He had outlined 5 specific BCWA goals, which, so the question becomes, are these the goals? Well, let's have a motion on the floor prior to any discussion regarding the director's goals or the BCWA goals.
Motion to approve the goals as written.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Now, I did talk to Steve about this. I didn't really notice the way it was titled until earlier today. And these are written as organizational goals, and I think, in my mind, they're perfect organizational goals. The question is, are the organizational goals the only goals for the executive director? When we met in personnel committee and we discussed last month about goals for the executive director, you might recall that I did a compilation of all the suggestions that everybody had made, and then put it together in a summary form of four different groupings. It was complex, to say the least, and there were a lot of goals. But I'm interested in hearing what the board wants to do, and we have a motion on the floor.
Maybe just a suggestion for next year, I don't know if it's relevant for this year, that, something on, I think, on the employee side, is there succession planning, or any additional training needs, any cross-training, any programs for potential personnel issues. I realize we don't have a huge department, but maybe something on that side of it as well, that we might consider, or Steve could consider.
And partial response to that is, I think your idea is a good one, the succession planning. We had a lot of discussion about that when we applied to hiring Steve, actually. But I think it's good to do on every so often. But what we did do last, I repeat, I broke what everybody had suggested in the evaluations into 4 categories: water system projects, property management, education and information, and financial and general management. And there were 16 items here in each of those, for those 4 categories. And they were more related to the individual as opposed to the organization, although what the director does on a regular basis sets in motion everything that the organization does. So it's sometimes hard to separate one from the other. So,
Mr. Chairman, but these are really just general recommendation. There's nothing to prevent us as a board from asking him to do something else at any time during the year.
no, and you're absolutely right. And we did that during his evaluation process. You were asked to suggest different goals, and everybody did suggest different goals, and that's how it came up to these 16 items. And I'm not saying all 16 should be approved and we should, but I didn't think there was anything in here that was pushing the envelope and breaking new ground here, so forth. But I'm just the chairman. We have a motion on the floor, and we can take the action and adopt what Steve summarized here. And I agree with the goals that he's outlined. But the board did say something and say, hey, here's some other ones as well. So I'm not going to go and belabor that point any further. So, what is your pleasure, gentlemen? Ready to make a vote?
Can I say this?
Sure.
A couple things. So, I guess, the executive director's goals, but I also see, like you said, the executive director's goals as also organizational goals at the same time. And these are the items that I report to the board on a monthly basis. So, I mean, if there are other items, more kind of like, I don't know, esoteric regarding management, I don't know if those are items that you would necessarily want to we report on a monthly basis or not, you know. I generally put into my report, you know, when we do have training opportunities for employees and things like that, just to let the board know. But, you know, I'm not sure if we're looking, if it's kind of two different things we're kind of thinking about here. You know, are we looking at kind of just like you know, personal growth goals, or, as as an employee for me, or are we looking at goals of the organization that we're trying to promote and report on, you know, on a month-to-month basis?
Yeah, and I would say yes to both of those. But to foster moving ahead on this, and as John was saying, we can ask Steve to do anything at any time. We can go and add to the goals if we wanted to. So I said I'm not going to go and get hung up over all this. I'm just reminding everybody what we did. So we could adopt his goals. I will then have Lauren send out a reminder to everybody as what we had put out on the table last time. And we can then use that as a something that the board members can bring up if they want to as we move through life. And say, hey, I think we should be doing number 14 on this list. And that is a good priority. But let us adopt what we got here so we can move forward.
Yeah, I think this is a good document here, and I guess I would say, I wasn't here for the last meeting, though I did provide some input. 16 is probably an unruly amount. I could get my head around if we asked Steve to have some additional personal goals to supplement this, but I would think it would need to be a lot less than 16. 16 seems a bit...
No, 16 is a big number.
For all at one time, yeah.
But no, I'm not gonna go any further. Is there any other discussion of the goals that have been presented by Steve tonight?
You got
Any modifications or
5
questions or so forth?
called out goals that are measurable,
Right,
that we can keep track of.
Right.
Anything else would be, I think, cumbersome. Personal growth goals, when he has a problem with an employee or there's an issue out there, I simply pick up the phone and that would come out in the evaluation process.
Right.
So he does his job.
Yeah.
You know?
and I think what we had identified were mostly organizational goals that Steve should address during the year. So it wasn't that, it wasn't all that personal, if you will. But anyway.
I mean, I would say these are the 5 things that we,
Yeah,
as an organization, support.
those are definitely 5 major things that we have in front of us. So, as I said, I don't have a problem with that.
Then why'd you bring it up?
Because, I brought it up because all of you did a whole bunch of work. And when the personnel committee met, I said I should try to make some sense of all this work that they did. And I summarized what everybody did and presented it at that meeting. And then we discussed it a little bit, but then didn't get into it last time. We said we would hold off on it to this time. And that's where we are today. So I'm going to remind you, because I'm going to ask Lauren to go and send out this summary just to everybody as to what we had talked about, just so you know.
Very good.
All right, so no other modifications to what has been presented for approval. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it.
Long.
Here you go. That's a grocery list.
But we electronically as well.
Yeah, we could get it out to them tonight, I don't know. I see we lost the number. Okay, next item on the agenda is executive session on a whole bunch of things. North Farm, RIDOH, notice of violation, investment of public funds, evaluation of bond council services and proposals, former plant facilities and property, and executive session minutes. Could I have a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we're going into executive session. Do I have a motion to seal the minutes?
Sorry, Ken.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, and those in favor of sealing the minutes? Say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and, with regard to the board vote on a 3-year bond council services agreement, do we have a motion to table that?
So moved.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and now we have, no, okay. Next scheduled meeting is April 24th. And I'll remind everybody that our Ethics Commission annual statements are due during the month of April, so you need to fill out those forms. You can fill them out online, it's really simple, straightforward.
Mine's already in.
Who's that? Is that the ethics?
I sent it certified mail.
Yeah, I did, I sent that.
Do I have a
Also,
motion?
have one more item, not an item, but regarding scheduled meetings in May. I know it's initially scheduled for May 22nd, but I'll be looking to schedule it for the following week, May 29th. I believe that'll be okay. Warren will send out a poll.
Okay. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
I don't hear it. Everybody's objecting to that? Say aye.
Aye.
No, that's it.